All right, thank you for clicking on this video. Before we get into the slides, I want to set the stage. Modern humans are walking around with ancient nervous systems built for predators, famine, and survival, not emails, deadlines, and relationship conversations. Somatic science is a unified theory of human experience. It explains why you feel the way you do, why you react the way you do, and why your nervous system keeps pulling you into patterns you didn't consciously choose. This video is a field introduction, a way to finally make the body make sense. Let's begin. Before we start though, I just want to do a quick disclaimer. Somatic science is a proposed interdisciplinary framework currently under peer review. This presentation introduces it as a unified system, not an established discipline, not a consensus, not a declaration of victory, just a framework that finally makes the body make sense. This presentation is a translation of a field introduction paper. It is a synthesis of peer-reviewed research across 6 domains. It's a proposed mechanistic architecture connecting interoception, autonomic regulation, sensorimotor loops, and somatic markers. And it's an attempt to make complex science understandable without making you want to take a nap. What this presentation is not. Again, this presentation is not a replacement for existing disciplines. It's not a critique of any field or researcher. It's not claiming consensus. It's not declaring a new official discipline. And it's definitely not we got it all figured out manifesto. Also, it's not medical advice or clinical advice, just science explained clearly. So let's talk about the scientific problemo. Mind-body dualism is still haunting the place because academic structures were built around it a century ago. 5 different scientific communities study the body in parallel because journals and funding streams evolved separately. Clinicians treat thoughts and physiology with different toolkits. Cognitive approaches fix the story, but not the autonomic dysregulation underneath it. We've been trying to solve a body-brain system with siloed tools. More problemos. Measurement is fragmented across specialties. HRV researchers, interoception researchers, sensory motor theorists, somatic clinicians all study different parts of the same system. And somatic experience gets treated as too subjective to be scientific, even though we can measure HRV, EDA, EMG, insular activation, and interoceptive accuracy with millisecond precision. The tools exist, the integration doesn't. The consequence is simple. Science split into separate departments, each studying a different part of the body-brain system, so no one is looking at the whole thing. Therapists, neuroscientists, and your nervous system have never agreed because the scientific structure wasn't built for integration. Somatic science exists because humans are running ancient nervous system firmware in a modern world. The history. Why humans keep doing the same things. Mark Twain once said, "It is not worthwhile to try to keep history from repeating itself, for man's character will always make the preventing of the repetitions impossible." Turns out he was describing the autonomic nervous system. Why humans keep doing the same things. Our interoceptive autonomic system evolved for survival, not modern life. So we respond to emails, deadlines, and relationship conversations with the same circuitry designed for predators and famine. Your sympathetic system was built for sprinting away from danger. Now it's sprinting because someone typed, "Can we talk?" Your vagus nerve is trying to maintain social engagement while your amygdala is convinced your boss is a bear. Your sensory motor loops were designed for navigating forests, not trying to navigate group chats. The somatic science explanation for this is modern life keeps pressing buttons your nervous system evolved 200,000 years ago. Your autonomic system treats psychological, social, and digital stressors as physical danger because it has no category for email anxiety. Your body runs the same survival software as your ancestors. Nervous systems don't update just because society does. History isn't repeating, your autonomic nervous system is. The lineage, a century of somatic insight across disciplines. Somatic science didn't appear out of nowhere. It's the convergence of a century of thinkers who were all circling the same truth. First, let's start with William James, who said, "We feel afraid because we tremble." Translation: the body reacts first, and the brain creates the emotion based on those reactions. William Reich said, "Character armor is chronic muscular tension." Translation: long term emotional stress shows up as long term physical tension. Alexander Lowen said, "The body is the mirror of the mind." Translation: your posture and movement reflect your emotional world. And Peter Levine said, "Trauma is not in the event, it is in the nervous system." Translation: trauma stays in the body when the survival response doesn't resolve. Continuing, we have Anil Seth and Hugo Critchley showed that interoception underpins emotional experience and the sense of self. Translation: who you think you are comes from how your brain interprets signals from your body. And today, somatic science integrates all of this into one unified framework. Somatic science rests on four pillars, the four subsystems that create your experience. First, we have interoception. Interoception is your brain's ability to sense and interpret what's happening inside your body: heartbeat, breath, tension, temperature, and gut signals. These signals shape your emotions, your sense of self, and how you experience the world. Next, we have autonomic regulation. Autonomic regulation is the system that manages arousal, safety, stress, and recovery. Your ability to regulate stress, connect with others, and return to baseline depends on how flexible this system is. Next, we have sensory motor loops. Sensory motor loops are the continuous feedback between movement, posture, and perception. Trauma and emotional patterns show up in how you move, hold yourself, and interact with your environment. Next is somatic markers. Somatic markers are the body based signals that guide decision making, visceral cues, tension patterns, emotional associations. Your body tags experience with meaning long before conscious thought kicks in. And the convergence, why somatic science is emerging now. 4 decades of parallel progress finally collided. Interoception research, psychophysiology, trauma science, embodied cognition, and somatic clinical practice all matured in isolation, but they matured enough to finally meet. Interoceptive neuroscience mapped the body brain axis. Autonomic research quantified regulation with HRV. Embodied cognition reframed perception as action dependent. Trauma physiology revealed somatic storage and resolution. Somatic therapies demonstrated reproducible bottom up changes. And predictive coding unified brain body inference under one model. 6 disciplines produced compatible findings. Measurement tools matured. Clinical outcomes validated somatic mechanisms. Predictive processing provided the computational glue. The evidence became too convergent to ignore. This leads us to the unified observer model. This is where everything snaps together. Your body generates the signals, your brain interprets the signals, your experience of self is the interpretation. Let's talk about the observer loop, how your body becomes your experience. Here's how the system actually runs. First, the body generates signals, interoceptive cues, autonomic shifts, movement patterns, somatic markers. Second, the brain predicts what those signals mean, not observes, predicts. Your brain is guessing what your body is doing and building your experience from the guess. Third, your identity state emerges. Who you are right now is basically what your body is doing right now. Fourth, your behavior follows the identity state. Your reactions, impulses, avoidance, connection, it's all downstream. Fifth, your behavior changes your body signals. Posture, breath, autonomic tone, all shift. And sixth, the loop repeats. You're not reacting to the world. You're reacting to your body's interpretation of the world. Why this model matters. This model explains why thoughts can't override physiology, because physiology creates the observer. It explains why identity shifts when autonomic state shifts. It explains why trauma persists even when the story is understood, because the observer state stays stuck. It explains why behavior is downstream of somatic configuration. It explains why selfhood is not a trait, it's a state machine. And it explains why somatic interventions change cognition, because they change the observer. You don't have a thought problem, you have observer state problems. And observer states come from the body. Somatic limbic resonance, how your nervous systems sync, clash, and co regulate. Now let's zoom out from the individual to the relational layer. Your nervous system doesn't operate alone, it's constantly reading and being shaped by other nervous systems. Somatic limbic resonance is the process where your autonomic state, your interoceptive predictions, your emotional tone, and your micro movements all influence and are influenced by the people around you. Moving on to the three amigos of resonance. Autonomic resonance, your state affects my state. Your vagus nerve reads facial muscles, voice tone, posture, and micro movements and adjusts accordingly. Interoceptive resonance, I feel what you feel. Your brain predicts internal signals partly based on the signals it perceives in others. This is why anxiety spreads. This is why calm spreads. Limbic resonance, our emotional states sync. Your limbic system locks onto the emotional tone of others. Shared affect becomes shared meaning. Your body mirrors the room. The resonance loop. When two observers interact, here's what happens. Your body generates signals, their body generates signals, both brains predict each other's signals, identity states shift, behavior synchronizes or diverges, and the loop repeats. Two nervous systems become one temporary system. Why resonance matters. This is the relational layer of the architecture. Co-regulation is real. Dysregulation is contagious. Calm is contagious. Emotional patterns spread through groups. Identity shifts depending on who you're with. Trauma responses activate in relational contexts. Healing happens through relational safety. You're not different around different people. Your nervous system is different around different nervous systems. Now we reach the third layer of the mechanistic architecture, identity. Identity isn't a fixed trait. It's a state machine built from interoceptive predictions, autonomic baselines, sensorimotor habits, somatic markers, and relational resonance. This layer explains why identity changes under stress, why people become different versions of themselves, why trauma creates identity states, why healing creates new identity states, and why behavior follows somatic configuration. Moving on to the identity state loop. It starts with body signals first, to brain signals, brain predictions, identity states, to behavior, to new body signals, and the loop repeats. So your self is your body's best guess about what's happening inside you. So if you change the body, change the signals, change the predictions, change the identity, you'll change the behavior. Why this architecture matters. This final layer explains why people get stuck in certain versions of themselves, why trauma creates identity states, and why healing creates new identity states, why cognitive change follows somatic change, why behavior is downstream of physiology, and why selfhood is dynamic, not fixed. You're not broken, you're patterned, and patterns can change. Moving on to the applications of somatic science. Somatic science isn't just a theory. It's a practical system for explaining why people get stuck, why people change, why relationships regulate or dysregulate, why trauma persists, why behavior loops repeat, why identity shifts under stress, and why bottom up interventions work. Trauma treatment. Somatic science explains why trauma lives in the nervous system and not the story, and why bottom up resolution works. In anxiety and panic, it reframes symptoms as interoceptive prediction errors and autonomic misfires, giving clinicians a map for regulating the observer state. In depression and shutdown, it clarifies dorsal vagal collapse as a physiological state, not a character flaw, and supports somatic activation. And it provides a unified scientific backbone for somatic therapies that already work. In performance and creativity, autonomic flexibility predicts flow, focus, and adaptability. In relationships and communications, somatic limbic resonance maps co regulation, conflict cycles, and emotional contagion. In leadership and group dynamics, it explains why groups synchronize, escalate, or stabilize. In education, it shows how autonomic state determines attention and memory. And in everyday life, it gives people tools to shift identity states through body based interventions. Somatic science makes testable predictions, and here's what the field wants to study next. Unified measurement models integrating HRV, EDA, EMG, interoceptive accuracy, and sensorimotor metrics. Identity state mapping, how autonomic and interoceptive patterns create predictable identity states. Resonance dynamics, how nervous systems synchronize or destabilize each other. Somatic intervention outcomes, comparing bottom up methods to cognitive approaches. Predictive processing and physiology, testing how the brain's predictions about the body shape emotion, behavior, and selfhood. At the closing arc, why somatic science matters for actual humans. You're not a mystery. You're not a collection of random quirks. You're not broken, dramatic, or too much. You're a nervous system doing its best with the signals it's receiving. Somatic science exists because your emotions have physiology. Your identity has a physiology. Your behavior has a physiology. Your patterns have a physiology. And physiology can change. The invitation. If you understand your body, you understand your mind. If you understand your observer state, you understand your behavior. If you understand your resonance, you understand your relationships. If you understand your identity states, you understand why you've been living the same loops. Somatic science is the update. You're the system it's explaining. The invitation is simple. Learn the architecture of your nervous system, and you learn how to change your life. Thank you so much for watching. If this resonated, here's what to do next. Like the video, it helps more people find somatic science. Subscribe if you're wanting more deep dives into the nervous system and the unified observer model. Share this with someone whose ancient nervous system is still trying to survive modern life. Comment with questions or topics you want to explore. Your nervous system is a whole universe, and we're just getting started. And if you want to follow the development of this field, everything continues right here on this channel. Thank you so much for watching. I have more details in the description below. Please follow, again, subscribe, and I'll see you in the future.